Plant diversity equals soil diversity. Understand this equation to become a better gardener. Time to duplicate nature. Promoting all aspects of diversity is the only way to secure the health in your garden. Start feeding and creating the circular motion of biodiversity. Your garden will reward you with unrecognizable growth. You will change the way you garden forever.
Okay, I want to get into explaining to you what biodiversity really does to your garden, to your soils, to the life that's in your garden. It just changes everything if your garden is turned into a biodiverse environment. So what happens is these plants go through the process of photosynthesis and they send, I've heard many numbers around 30%. They send 30% of the energy that they created back into this area here, the rhizosphere. This area here is an exchange area. So the rhizosphere releases sugars, which are exudates, into this zone. And what happens in this zone is these bacteria and fungal colonies are attracted by this sugar that the plants are willing to donate in a symbiotic relationship to this zone. So these bacteria and fungi are completely entrapped in this zone because there's so much food available, there's so much sugar available. And that 30% that these plants give up is a beautiful investment for the plants because these bacteria and fungal colonies turn this back into energy, and when they die, that also gets turned into plant energy. So it's a win-win for both these living organisms. So this biodiverse polyculture, let's say it has a number of 80 different plants. So they will do this. They'll go A, B, Z, F, M, G, O, P, R, Q, Z, A. So what happens to them is they are depositing so many different types of sugars. And that's a polyculture. They'll go through the whole alphabet. They'll put the entire alphabet of different types of sugars back or exudates back into the ground. In a monoculture, you'll only have A, B, C, D, just for an example, just to use letters. So these bacteria and fungi, they only have this diversity to digest. So they can only digest a small number of sugars. In this area, in the polyculture, you have all these different sugars. And what happens is we have up to 10,000 different bacteria and fungi in the soil. And what happens is if you have a very limited sugar that's being advertised to these guys, then what happens is your soil doesn't get conditioned biodiverse. It's not diverse. The soil is very sterile, very organized in a very small pattern. In this scenario, you have all these different sugars that are being offered to these 10,000 different bacteria and fungal colonies. So what happens is, I'm just going to do some numbers. So let's say you have 8,627 different bacteria working in this rhizosphere zone. In this area, let's say you have only 816. So what happens is this soil is conditioned 10 times as much as this. It's 10 times more biodiverse, the soil. So what it can do is it can offer the plants, these diverse plants, it can offer them diverse food in exchange for them offering biodiverse sugars. In this case, in the monoculture, This usually gets substituted with fertilizers. And that will supplement the missing energy of the what the bacteria and fungus created in this zone. Is missing something because it's so sterile, it's so not biodiverse. That's the problem with the monoculture. It just offers very little in return to the plants. And this biodiversity that's happening in the polyculture is benefiting from this diversity, the 10,000 different types of bacteria that are in the soil. So it's maximizing the biodiversity by this huge number. Now what happens is the plants themselves, they will go through a vigorous improvement because they are being supplied by these massive amounts of diverse bacteria. So they are digesting the exudates and the sugars and feeding it back to the plants. So the more diverse this is, the more diverse the plant food is that these plants are consuming, compared to the monoculture where they're getting this A, B, C, D turned back into sugar. Here they have the entire alphabet being turned back into sugar. So these guys on top, this plant material on top, the biodiverse plant material, is being fed a much better, a much more biodiverse diet than the monoculture is. And that's why they always have to substitute this monoculture with lots of fertilizers and chemicals. So if you can have your garden being biodiverse in close proximities, what I mean by this is that this is a patch of lettuce. That doesn't help as much as if there was lettuce, and other plants in between, some trees. So this chaos organization and the roots are going to intertwine a lot better. So the whole system, the whole idea of soil improvement happens because we're involving these 10,000 bacteria, and we're involving all these different productions of sugar. The more diverse the sugar is, the more it's going to attract these fungal colonies and the bacteria. So this idea of planting biodiverse will do a couple of things. It will make this a very healthy growing zone. It'll make this a very biodiverse, healthy soil. In return, that gets better every year, because if you keep the biodiversity above, you're going to keep the biodiversity
below.
This here has to be helped with crop rotation and with fertilizers. So when you're creating your garden, make sure to include as much biodiversity as you can, and that'll help you immensely with improving your soil immediately. And that is the big difference, by having the biodiversity improving every single layer of this process.